Since the debut of Khabib Nurmagomedov in the UFC, these Dagestani fighters have had a certain aura to them. Their pressure, their wrestling, their undefeated records has kind of made them out to be like monsters that are impossible puzzles to solve. Okay, I just burped. After Saturday's UFC main event, a realization has kind of come over me, and I've come to the conclusion that most of them are pretty fucking mid. Let me talk about this for a second, okay? So, Merab's just come off a pretty decisive win against Umar Nurmagomedov, who, let's be honest, everyone, including myself, thought was like the antidote to the poison that has been Merab ever since the day he won the belt. I have to admit, I did not see him doing to Umar what he's done to everyone else, just because, like many others, I was under this Dagestani illusion that all guys with an OV in their surname can fucking grapple. Of course, I'm not saying Umar can't grapple. He did by far the best that anyone's done against Merab grappling, and even took Merab down himself. But Umar is not Khabib. We need to stop thinking all these guys who train under Khabib are Khabib. It's like every time someone like Abu Bakr, Umar, Saeed competes, we think we're about to see some like dominant display. But the guys I mentioned above, they're like primarily strikers. Yeah, these guys can all grapple, but they're not like on some level above everyone else, maybe with the exception of Islam. And Saeed isn't even related to Khabib despite sharing the surname, but yeah, everyone still associates him with him. All these other Dagestani fighters like Shara Bullet, yes, he's undefeated, but he's shown to have really nothing on the ground, especially in his first fight. Ankalaev got submitted by Paul Craig, so that shows, like, you know, his ground game isn't exactly where Khabib's would have been either. The only thing you'd need to watch out for in a Paul Craig fight is a triangle, and Ankalaev still ended up in one, so yeah, I just don't think he's really that good on the ground. Even now, like his fight with, you know, like Jan Blachowicz, like his grappling wasn't dominant. Yeah, it won him the fight, but Blachowicz is shown to be pretty bad off his back, as shown in his fight against Glover. Yeah, so let's look at some other examples. Saeed Nurmagomedov, he's got 3 guillotine guillotine finishes. Sorry, I couldn't say that. He's got 3 guillotine finishes in the UFC. But he's still primarily a striker. He's been on his back in fights quite a few times and hasn't really shown to be like some absolute will beater. He's also lost 3 of his fights, I believe, 3 or 4 of his fights. Maybe not in the UFC, but I'm pretty sure he's lost like 3 fights in total. Umar had this kind of Khabib type aura because he hadn't lost. But do you think Sandhagen would be scrambling with Khabib the same way he was with Umar? Like, we should have used that information and realized that Umar doesn't actually have that dominant a ground game, and it probably wasn't, you know, it wasn't that long ago that Sandhagen was embarrassed by Aljo. I mean, of course, he's greatly improved his wrestling, but if it only takes, you know, 2 years to hold your own in wrestling against Umar, should we really be thinking Umar was going to out-scramble and out-grapple Merab? In hindsight, there's been plenty of examples why Umar shouldn't have been the favourite, and these Dagestani fighters have kind of proved that. Look, we've got fighters like Muhammad Mokaev, who, despite being undefeated in the UFC, didn't exactly look like, you know, a world champion against like lower opposition, and then I had one of the worst fights I've ever seen with Manal Cap. There's Roman Kopylov, who's a great fighter to watch. He's got 3 losses on his record, but you know, he's just kind of mid, isn't he? Like, he's not going to be a champion, I don't believe. Ikram Iliskarov looked like an absolute world beater against unranked guys, and then Whitaker comes in and sleeps him in 1 round. What other examples of this? Amari Akhmedov hasn't had a fight since like 2021, but he traded wins and losses throughout his whole UFC career. He's from Dagestan. I'm sure there's other examples of guys as well, but you get what I'm saying. These Dagestanis are very beatable, maybe with the exception of Islam and Khabib. And even Islam has shown weaknesses against the likes of like Alexander Volkanovski, and he got chinned earlier in his career. But I'm starting to digress. It's hard to see that Islam of today getting flatlined the way he did back then, but I just think the stigma attached to Dagestani fighters is that they're all good, when it's really only 2 of them that have ever really been elite level championship caliber fighters. Going back to Umar, Yeah, his best win going into the Merab fight was Corey Sandhagen, who of course is one of the best guys in the division, but he showed he wasn't really championship material when he fought Aljo, as much as I hate to say it, like, because prior to becoming a crotch sniffer, he was one of my favourite fighters to watch in the division, but Aljo choked him out and made him look like he didn't belong in the title fight. Now, when you compare that to the guys that Merab has beaten, it's like, how the fuck can anyone pick this dude to win, especially not being able to finish Sandhagen when Aljo did it in like one round. Merab has beaten Jose Aldo, a former featherweight, and yeah, the greatest featherweight of all time, probably. Maybe it's kind of hard to say really now, but Volk's kind of had a downfall and he's still active, so I don't know if you can really say he's greater than Aldo anymore at this point. It's kind of hard. Yeah, anyway, he's beaten Jose Aldo, Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley, Henry Cejudo, Marlon Moraes. You know, that's 5 former champions compared to Umar's win over Sandhagen. And Umar, for some reason, was the favourite going in. It just doesn't make sense. Hopefully now that Umar's lost, people will start to realise that most of the Dagestani fighters in the UFC are just UFC fighters and probably won't ever touch the belt. They're not really anything special. The Dagestani with the best chance of becoming a champion, if he wrestles, is probably Magomed Ankalaev. But I don't think his wrestling's really that good enough to hold down Pereira in some form of like Khabib display of dominance. I don't think he'll shoot a single takedown before he gets chinned and laid out cold. I also think Shara Bullet is going to get flatlined by MVP. I don't think there's a single chance he shoots a takedown on MVP. So yeah, I think this is the year the Dagestani Downfall begins, and it all started with Umar's loss, really. I'm going to predict it right now that Shara Bullet loses to MVP by vicious knockout. Ankalaev loses to Poatan. Said Nurmagomedov, his next fight's against Vinicius Oliveira, who's won every single fight he's had in the UFC, and I think he'll probably finish Said as well. Islam, I think, probably beats everyone in his division, but if Ilia Topuria moves up, I think he's got a very strong chance of knocking Islam out. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels like there's a shift in the MMA landscape, especially to me when it comes to like Dagestani aura, essentially. What do you think anyway? Do you think the Dagestanis are all overpowered, or do you think they're overrated? Who do you think is going to win when Ankalaev and Pereira face each other? Do you think I'm just talking shit? And where do you think Kevin Lee fits into all this? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.